Hello, I'm Ruck Schildhouse, and because things on the internet seem to lose their date reference, today is Tuesday, October 4th, 2022. And being a little bit conservative, a little bit lazy, a little bit active, whatever, this portion of the video is probably going to be used to intro several site visits of our Wish of a Lifetime AARP Regine trip from San Diego to Bastogne for the Battle of the Bulge battlefields and museums. I owe Wish of a Lifetime and AARP and Regine a lot for granting this wish. This was probably one of the 5 most emotional events in my life. I'm married, 1 wife, 3 daughters, military career behind me, a lot of other things in my life, and this trip ranks in probably the top 5 most emotional events in my life. So let's get on with it. Thanks for watching.
The 101st Airborne Museum was about 2 blocks away from our hotel in a 3-story building. They had displays on all 3 floors, slightly above elevated first floor, second, third floor, and they also had displays in the basement. Very well set up. We spent about 3 hours there discussing, examining, looking at the place, discussing events with several other visitors. Remember, part of my mission was to tell the people of Bastogne thanks. And I accomplished that, and I could have spent 3 days in this museum reading the displays. Due to the timeline, what I was doing was I was glancing at displays, trying to take a decent photo of them, and trying to take a decent photo of the signage. This is Joyce in the garden area where you enter the museum, and this is a street sign that's taken some bullet hits from World War II. In the lower left corner of that screen, that thing that looks like a garbage can kind of sitting on its side, that's actually the rocket motor out of a V-2 rocket. Now, see those pictures up on the wall? That's these pictures, and what caught my attention was my dad's unit was the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, and this is his unit, and there's actually 2 pictures associated with this. They would be coming back through that same point later on. Kind of cool. I was there trying to maybe learn some more about my dad, maybe complete my dad's wish, maybe complete my wish. As I said, this was probably one of the 5 most emotional events in my life. So the signage was fantastic. This is an example of what we found throughout the museum. Very nicely framed, usually lead in English, followed in French. There were a few pure German things that were there, and that was because they were printed for use within Germany. They weren't, you know, why would you write a German military manual in French or English? Makes no sense. This is representative of the displays throughout the area, all very well done, nicely lit, frequently behind glass, which gave you reflection issues. And that's not a negative comment. They're trying to protect their displays, and I agree with that. So this is the common gear equipment issued to a combat soldier. He would either get the M1 caliber 30 service rifle, I think is its proper name, commonly called a Garand, or the M1 carbine, which is the one that's down leaning up against the box. My dad didn't think much of the M1 carbine. I don't either. I fired it. That's his trenching. That's a trenching tool down in the bottom center. trying to dig a foxhole in frozen ground is tough. Moving on, another one of their displays. My dad was an artillery guy, as I understood it from his record. Unfortunately, I have a post right in the middle of this because it was a corner display. But that's an artillery round, several of them. The yellow-tipped one is probably, my guess, is a tank round. The one to the right of the yellow-tipped one is probably a howitzer round. I'm guessing. I'm not one of those guys, so to speak. But a lot of information, a lot of items on display throughout this museum. This one here made me giggle and laugh. Okay, first of all, there's a German handbook sitting here, how to speak German, which our troops needed to do. And then this tank is made out of wood, a lot of very nice carving. Somebody had time, and there's a round from a 105 millimeter howitzer, if I'm not mistaken. Have been mistaken more than once in my life. And a World War II version of a walkie-talkie. Now, as an amateur radio operator, my walkie-talkies are about the size of maybe 2 inches by an inch by 4 inches. You could probably fit 10 of my walkie-talkies inside this one, and I have much better range and reception. Kind of fun. Technology changes. And that helmet is from a tanker. George S. Patton played a major role in the Battle of Bastogne, the Battle of Bulge, the defense of Bastogne, and the fact that his Third Army was the unit that penetrated the encirclement and provided relief to the Allies in the 101st Airborne. Several displays about George S. Patton in here, and several displays around town about George S. Patton. It's kind of nice to realize that Bastogne is not going to forget the Allies. There were a number of units inside the encirclement. The 101st had command, so frequently you'll hear, and if I had say the 101st, I mean the 101st Airborne Division and all of the other units included, collectively the Allies. And here's some of the other units that are involved in the that were encircled and, as they phrase, inside the perimeter and under the command of the 101st Airborne Division. Numerous other units. Plus, you had stragglers that were picked up in a unit that was referred to as snafu. Situation normal, all fouled up. A military term. As we step off, another kind of interesting display that caught my eye because I carried a flashlight as a naval aviator, just like that one in the photo. They're probably still being issued that way. They're great flashlights. I actually have a couple of them in my drawer because they were quote-unquote personal equipment issues. And reading this plaque, so on a number of these displays, explanations, I carve them apart so that you can read them. And here we have Donald R. Burgett, A Company, 1st Battalion, 506th Infantry Regiment, my dad's unit, 101st Airborne Division, talking about the D-bar. Now, food given to the GIs was often very high calorie, very low residue, what's referred to as residue. And it's still done today. NASA does this, the U.S. military still does this. If you give them low residue, then you don't have to go to the bathroom a lot to pass solids, so to speak, if you get my drift. So you get a MRE, and it's got 3,500 calories in it. It's much more than the average person would need in a day, but a combatant needs more calories because he's active. And when you get done, not a whole lot's going to come out. Kind of fun and interesting. Ate a lot of MREs during Desert Storm. Cigarettes, candy, Zippo lighters, coffee. A lot of things go out to the combat troops to keep their morale up. You don't want to annoy them. You want to keep them as happy as you possibly can. That's how they fight. And stepping off, there's a number of maps around the 101st Airborne Museum, all nicely annotated. I wish I could have sat and studied these things. Unfortunately, we were a time crunch, and I might have them backwards here. So this particular map is showing how the battle of the Bulge was running at one particular point, and one of the things that the museum has to be noted for is having these sorts of plaques, numerous plaques throughout the museum that carry the history of either a unit or a history of the battle. And this one here is actually I think 4 or 5 plaques, displays, and we'll just click through them. If you want to try to read them, you can obviously stop the video. And they're talking about how the battle went. A lot of people were lost during the battle. War is fatal. It's not good. It's not fun. My units that I was directly associated with during Desert Storm never had a serious injury for whatever reason, so we were lucky. I lost all my guys in training, in workups, while on liberty, whatever else, and it's tough to lose people for reasons like that. Here's another one of the really excellent maps that showing the progression through there. Bastogne was not an initial primary objective of the German army. For some reason, after it was kind of passed up, they said, we aren't going to leave these guys behind us, so it became a prime objective, became a focus. They should have just blown by it. They probably would have been more successful if they had blown by it. They made several tactical and strategic mistakes in the Battle of the Bulge. Everybody makes mistakes in war, but focusing on Bastogne was probably the key that broke their back. Another display of numerous items picked up around the battle, and this is a 48-star flag. Don't see many of them around anymore because Alaska and Hawaii were not yet states. They were territories. My dad served in the territory of Alaska. And with maps, here's the key to a very large map. This map is in the entry area, the second or third room. We walk into the first big room. The first room being where you pay admission. The second room is the little souvenir shop. Then you turn into this onslaught of presentation. And not sure what day this particular map represents in the battle. I don't think I got a good photo of that. But as you look at a couple of different views of this map, you'll see that there's a lot of detail in here. And my dad's unit, the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, is on the perimeter, literally in the center of this photo. If you see the 101st Airborne Screaming Eagle patch, his perimeter, his coverage area was just to the left of that. Can't read it real well, but it's at the on the right side of the blue line. If you can read the 501st, they were on the left side of that little blue line. 506th was on the right side at the end of that red arrow, which the red arrow indicates the Germans. And here's the German order of battle for the Battle of the Bulge. Another thing that was set up for that big map. Another look at the map. A lot of information here. I would love to have studied this map literally for an hour and a half. Used something like Rendezvous with Destiny, or one of the other really good Battle of the Bulge books to correlate this map to the events that are recorded elsewhere. I will also tell you that if you are going to read books on the Battle of the Bulge, books on the 101st Airborne, if you read 3 of them, you will find inconsistencies, and that's because of the research that the individuals did. There was a bit of humor. So this one here talks about Vincent Speranza of the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment going out to find something to drink for his wounded buddy. Goes into a tavern and decides that, well, since they're closed, might as well take some of their wares back in a helmet, and it became airborne beer. Lots of weapons, the tools of war, on display here, most of them in very good condition. Impressed by the quality and care of the exhibits. How the 101st Airborne Division was constructed, and this comes up from a comment of someone that I was talking to, and they said, well, your dad was in the 101st Airborne Division. I said, yeah, he was in the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. Well, wait a minute. If he was in the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, how was he in the 101st Airborne? It's a tier structure. And when you go up to, I'm going to start, and I'm not an Army guy, I'm a Navy guy. I hope I've got this right. You at the top you have a Corps, CORPS, and that has numerous armies underneath it. Each army has numerous divisions. Each division has numerous regiments. Each regiment has numerous companies. Each company has numerous platoons. Each platoon has numerous squads. So in a squad you might have, say, 6 to 12 people, usually assembled to accomplish a specific task. And then you get the companies, which have more than, they get larger as they get up. So Corps have a whole lot of people because they'll have numerous armies. And my dad's unit is shown in here, the 506th. And my dad was a math wizard. One of the 4 or 5 papers we have says he was a plotter. He told us he was an artillery coordinator. That would correlate. He was a math wizard, and that would also correlate to being an artillery coordinator because it's very mathematical. And I get a bit emotional. This is my dad's unit. I was thankful that my dad lived through it, because if he didn't live through it, I wouldn't have been born. Another display of just all sorts of interesting things. I love Payday candy bars. There's all sorts of gum sitting in this place. There are Tootsie Rolls and cigarettes. During World War II, and I will refer to them as people explained them to me, there were what's called victory packs of cigarettes, and that was either 3 or 5 cigarettes put in a single package, and you'll see these small Camel packages. Not sure how many are in it, but usually it was something like 3 to 5, and they were basically handouts. Hey, you did a good job today, it was bad fighting, excellent training, whatever, here's your reward, 3 to 5 cigarettes. Thanks very much. Wrigley Spearmint Gum, which is home based in Chicago, where I'm from. Knee High Soda, I think that's strawberry. Coca-Cola, and then in the upper right is that Chocola Never heard of that before. Not sure I want to drink. I like KO, if you know what KO beverage is. There's a fairy pistol, a flare gun down at the bottom, fairy pistol. All sorts of miscellaneous stuff throughout this museum. And it's kind of cool to look at it and realize how technology's changed. We come up to this one, and this one caught my eye because it's got that little notepad thing off for the 101st Airborne. There was a whole lot of unit identity materials generated by the individual units. So you get not only your shoulder patch, you get notepads, you get letterhead to write home on, whatever else. Kind of cool. This particular one, though, talks about Captain Duffield and as civil affairs. And the Army is structured so that when they come in and take control of an environment, they have the skill level to do it, so they can do everything. And they did this in major sections of Germany during World War II, where they provided total control and operation. So civil affairs unit, and this guy here comes in and starts helping one of the widows inside the encirclement with her cows, and she was going to keep tending her cows, so he was out there helping her. Kind of reinforces what my dad said. The citizens of Bastogne helped the Allies helped the citizens. In this photo, the guy closest to you on the right, obviously an MP, reading a shoulder patch. The guy standing in the rows are German prisoners of war. The war's over for them. One of the kind of interesting things with the German prisoners of war was we sent them back to be held in towns in the states of like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and I would imagine others. And when they were put in those towns, they were put up in barracks type structures, and quite commonly they were allowed to walk around and hold jobs and work. Kind of interesting. There was a bit of humor throughout the battle. It's how you keep your forces fighting. You keep them motivated. And this one here is, let's get a receipt for Bastogne. So receipt from the 101st Airborne Division, the town of Bastogne, Luxembourg Province, Belgium. Condition used but serviceable, kraut disinfected. Signed by Major General Troy H. Middleton. You have to agree, you have to appreciate the humor that was floating around the Allies in the 101st Airborne. The German request, hey, we want you to surrender, we've got you surrounded, or we're going to annihilate you. And the response is nuts. Simply nuts. Don't explain anything else, just send it back nuts. And then, because the Germans don't understand the American sense of humor, it has to be explained to them. Other things that were jokes that were running around was the Germans have us surrounded, the poor bastards. There was quite a bit of humor running around. You have to. In this photo, I used to jump parachutists out of my Navy planes. That was one of my missions. And I jumped parachutists, sport parachutists out of my civilian planes. In the center of this picture, with the Screaming Eagle patch on it and the chin strap on it, is the reserve parachute, the parachute that sits on your chest, hangs on your chest when you jump out of the airplane. Your main chute's in your backpack, and your main chute is pulled out by a static line in these jumps. And if that chute doesn't work right, you cut it away and you pull the ripcord on your reserve chute, and you hope your reserve chute works. My dad would say your reserve chute would probably be great if it opened up before you hit the ground, because you did jump low. Bastogne was cold. It was among the coldest winters recorded in 70 plus years. And in this picture, the GIs managed to find some firewood, get a fire going, and They probably moved back a little bit from the fire for the photo, but it was a cold winter. This photo caught my eye because as you read the little notation to it, and as I said, I've clipped the signs, the display information, and I've inserted them in these photos. So first of all, well, here's a half track that's obviously taking a little bit of wear. It's got a .30 caliber water-cooled machine gun on top of it. There's a Jeep in the background. Okay, so you see the medic standing off to the right. If you look to the right bottom corner of the photo, there is a medic down on the ground, obviously taking care of someone. I will tell you from a Navy career, some of the people I appreciated most were my medical support people. They kept me alive, they kept me fixed, and I was never hurt in combat. But you get hurt. Being in the military is a tough profession. You get hurt, and then people have to take care of you. This photo, the two guys over the trash can, they appear to be peeling potatoes, and the other guy's got a really big pot. He's stirring something up. I'm just guessing potato soup. If you notice, he's got a pistol holster on his belt. When the world goes to hell, everybody becomes an infantryman, and this cook is armed, ready to go out. This picture was also in the Bastogne barracks, which we would later tour, and which is the subject of the next video. So here is what's called a march line. If you look, they're spaced out, they aren't bunched up. And it's, once again, the 506th Infantry, Parachute Infantry Regiment, my dad's unit. They're on the road to Novelle. If you look at the ground, it's a black and white photo, so it looks wet. Not sure if it's snow, ice, water, whatever. Look at the sky. Doesn't look like a good environment. It sure wasn't the sunny beaches of Southern California. Another photo of the 506th on the march. This time here, look at what they're carrying. There's a lot of bazookas in this line. There's a lot of bazooka rockets in this line. There's the guy in the far right photo is carrying bazooka rockets. These guys are heading out to battle, and they're armed to take on armor. Tanks, half-tracks, armored cars, whatever. So it's an infantry regiment intending to meet armor. More miscellaneous stuff on display. Most of this is German. There was German, French, British, American stuff throughout this museum, but it focused on the U.S. allies, U.S. units, 101st Airborne Division, and the other U.S. units there, and the Germans that they fought. And as addressed in the tour of the battlefield, the Germans considered the German army was considered to be two segments. You had the Wehrmacht, which was the professional soldiers and most of the civilian draftees, and those guys usually fought by the rules of war, realizing that everybody makes mistakes, everybody goes off over the edge, so to speak. And then you had the SS, which were the fanatics. The rule of war was, we're going to win, we don't care what you do. This display caught me by surprise. I did glance at it, then I stopped and read it and said, never, in no book I read does it talk about Native Americans, Indians, U.S. American Indians, having fought in Bastogne. And this display says they did. I have no reason to doubt the display. I thought it was kind of cool that they included it and they put it in there. They missed a very important piece of history. I've seen photos like this elsewhere. This one was sitting there. This is a Panzer tank on its turret. It's referred to as turtled. And this individual is looking at it going, okay, wow. The write-up for this says it was probably done by an airborne, by an air attack. Okay. I have no idea. You just need to appreciate that this tank probably weighs 110,000 pounds. And whatever attacked it flipped it over. There are escape hatches on the bottom, so they could get out that way. There's other escape hatches on what they call the deck of the tank, so they could get out. You just wonder if they did. My dad said that the citizens of Bastogne inside the encirclement supported, helped, assisted, aided the Allies, the 101st Airborne, and without them, they probably would not have been able to hold Bastogne. This picture just anchors the fact that there were children inside the encirclement, and looks like they're having a good time. A lot of damage was done to the town. Here is an ambulance, Army ambulance, sitting outside, parked outside one of the buildings. If you look through the windows, that building right behind the vehicle no longer has a roof. Town took a lot of direct hits from artillery. Looking at this one here, you kind of have to giggle and laugh and wonder how many of the GIs are wondering if they can get rib roast out of this cow that's walking down the street. Mother Nature, interesting lady. In the middle of everything that's going on, cow decides it's going to walk down the street. And you get an idea what the weather was like. That's not a sunny sky, and there's a lot of snow on the ground. Psychological warfare is not new. It's been going on for a long time. In the medieval times, what they would do is they would use catapults to fire the heads of beheaded captured soldiers over the walls, over into the enemy troops, to demoralize them. So psychological warfare has been going on for a long time. The Germans did it during the Battle of Bastogne, throughout World War II, trying to get the Allied soldiers' spirits broken. According to most of the books, what most of these actually did was generate a lot of jokes and responses, trying to cover up probably the emotional impact. Come up to this guy, and this guy is loaded to the teeth. I'm not sure. I'm not an Army guy. I'm a Navy guy. This guy's carrying an M1 Grand. He's carrying a 1911 45 ACP in his left shoulder holster. He's got binoculars. There's also a knife that he's packing. My guess that it's either a guide, a pathfinder, or a scout. Just by the way he's armed, he's packing a lot. He's packing more than most of the common infantrymen would. Medics, as I said, are critical. If you get hurt, you have to be taken care of. And part of it is, even if you aren't hurt, you want to make sure, you want to have that feeling that somebody is there willing to help you. And medics do more than just medical stuff. And this guy here he's taking care of somebody that we can't quite see. And he's at a mortar position. This photo just has me laughing. My question is, where did he get the pipe? Now, I can only assume that he borrowed the pipe from the police officer, Henri Lecari, that they swapped pipes for the photo or whatever. I can only assume. I don't know. You look at photos like this and you realize that the Allies that were trying to fight the war were trying to keep life as normal as possible. As I said, there were a lot of weapons, a lot of medals throughout this museum. This is a German, I think it's an M43. I'm not an expert in German small arms during World War II. It's a machine gun, a very effective tool. They had a lot of effective handguns, a lot of effective rifles, machine guns. This one here, 60 millimeter mortar crew, taking a look at what's in the background. I'm not sure if they're under what's called a canopy cover or if they're in a trench, but they're waiting, the guys on the phone, waiting for the orders for the coordinates, and the guys, the phrase is, he's hanging around, he's about to drop a round down a mortar tube. The guy on the phone is trying to find out where somebody wants it to go. Mortars, what they have is they have an explosive charge in the base. As you drop the mortar round into the tube, a pin in the bottom of the tube hits the primer, the explosive round goes off, it's simply a poof, and the round is pushed by that explosive charge out of the tube, downrange somewhere, and you change the elevation and azimuth of the tube to try to get the round where you want. It's not powered once it's in flight. That charge is simply get the round going. Cigarettes, a big thing for the GIs. Tobacco, zigzag cigarette papers, roll your own, and I think it says unglued. Pipe tobacco, rolling tobacco, cigarettes of all kinds, different sized packs for different reasons, lots of cigarettes, deck of cards, a lot of stuff to keep the morale going. And this one here, this pamphlet, this display, is one of the really enjoyable things at the museum because it talks about how units ended up in Bastogne. And this is the 333rd and the 969th Field Artillery Battalions. And you're going to see, if you pause it and read it, how they showed up here. It's, in my opinion, it's interesting. It plays into a slightly later role, slightly later photo. The U.S. had constructed, designed, created what would be called a proximity round. Previously, an artillery round had basically one of two types of fuses. It either had a time fuse that when you fired the round after 6, 10, 12 seconds, the round exploded, or it had an impact fuse where it hit a target and it was designed to explode on impact, or was delayed to penetrate and then explode. Those were the two basic types of fuses. Then the proximity round was created. The proximity round is a little radar gizmo that when it detects that it's close to another object to a preset distance, then it explodes. So you can fire this round without doing a whole lot of math to it numerous times down range rapidly, and have them all set to explode at, say, 50 feet above the ground, or 50 feet before an object that they would run into. It was top secret up until Bastogne. They were in the battlefield, but they were not allowed to be used. And General McAuliffe ordered their use without higher approval, and it was later condoned as, yep, you did the right thing. Time to go. Lots of photos running around. These are German tanks, German units, and there's good descriptions to tell you what's going on. Some more photos. I think these are mixed between German and American. Kind of cool. I really like this because it added people to the issue. So here is 969th Field Artillery Battalion guy, and the books, none of the books I read addressed this either. This is a black unit with white officers, and this guy is lugging a 155 millimeter round up towards the gun. The box underneath his foot states it's a 155. That's how I know. I'm assuming that they kept it consistent. And one of the other articles on this was that these guys had a habit of singing while they were working, because loading, firing, unloading, reloading, and setting the weapon to the coordinates azimuth elevation to get the round to where it was supposed to go. Took a fair amount of coordination, and if you're singing, you develop group coordination. Why do soldiers do cadence, jody calls, while they're marching? Because it gives them rhythm, unit rhythm. These are howitzers. My dad loved the 155 and 105 as an artillery guy. He thought they were great weapons. The 101st dropped from underneath the belly and wings of C-47s, what they call Pac 75s. He said it took 5 guys to put it together, 3 guys to crew it. Said it was a great anti-infantry weapon, not real good on tanks unless the tank was very close. So when I see artillery rounds, I kind of take an interest. This picture here is a American soldier in what's called fall weather or winter gear, and his weapon is upside down, which indicates bad weather. You don't want to get water stuff in the muzzle of your rifle. It will explode, not function right, and then you no longer have a weapon. My dad said that when the 101st was sent up to Bastogne, initially they were actually sent somewhere else and then diverted to Bastogne. They were pulled out of their rest and recovery camp without their full winter gear, without their full weapons, whatever else. So it was the coldest place he'd ever been in his life, till they got their gear up there and it was still cold. Coldest winter in 70 plus years. But the weather gear, the cold weather gear, came up afterwards, so they did at least get that. Another display, it's a mortar setup, obviously, and people doing things around. Because of some of the reflections and angles, and I apologize for that, can't really see everything that's going on. I took a photo of my wife, Joyce. My wife, Joyce, and I have discussed my dad and her dad's service in the Navy, and my mother's service in the Navy. My service in the Navy, I was married the entire time. And she discussed numerous things with my dad before he passed away. She was reading a fair amount of the signs. This was an extremely emotional trip for us. Extremely emotional museum. Interesting stuff throughout this museum. These are pieces from a damaged glider. All sorts of stuff. During the encirclement, the Allies and 101st were resupplied by aerial drops, parachute drops. They had additional reinforcements coming in via parachutists, and they also had gliders coming in, and not all the gliders survived. Here's a photo, and it's just representative of a lot of the displays. So a couple of Germans that look like they're in a shop, or and I'm assuming it's a shop, are discussing something or another. These guys are armed to the teeth. That's a machine gun that's leaning up against a table, and belt fed obviously by the bandolero on the guys on the right, but he's also packing a sidearm. And the other guy, I think's probably holding a Model 98 Mauser, just guessing. This one caught me by surprise, but considering that the town was still occupied by a number of civilians, so things like cafes, stores were probably still open and closed, depending on the attack, parameters, whatever else. In the basement of the 101st Airborne Museum, they had a really good participation event. You went in, you sat down, and then the attack started. You heard the tanks rumbling overhead. You heard the artillery rounds hitting. The building shook, whatever else. it was cool. It was really good. This one here talks about Pathfinders. World War II was the first time that Pathfinders were formally identified and participated. My dad talked about, and I can't confirm this, my dad talked about jumping into Normandy on D-Day, carrying either a special radio or a special light, which he lost because he landed in water. Said he lost everything he had. The only reason that he stayed alive was he was a strong swimmer, got out of the water. Not sure what he actually landed in because it was night, having lost everything but basically his uniform. And in a reunion that he participated in the north side of Chicago when I was still in high school, 1968 time frame, I have a suspicion that he might have been associated with Pathfinder. I can't prove that. So this talks about Pathfinders and what they did. This is a parachutist. He's hanging in the stairway so that you can get a indication of what they look like when they're coming down. His main chute is covering the window. That reserve chute that we saw earlier is on his chest. Fortunately, this guy didn't need it. They were pretty heavily loaded coming out of the airplane. War is not fun. Bastogne was cold. These soldiers, there's a guy standing in the right. You can barely make him out, but the guys on the ground are casualties. These soldiers are seeking whatever shelter they can, protection from the weather and protection from the enemy. They're obviously very interested in something that's occurring off to the left side of the photo. Not sure what it is, but when in doubt, it's a whole lot safer to be sheltered than be out in the open. Now, this photo of troops slugging it through the snow kind of caught my attention because, number one, it depicts for the first time one of the few photos of the snow that was in Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge. So if you want to find your enemy, you can follow a snow path if you want. Expect become cold, expect to find him cold. But look at the telephone pole in the background. There is a whole lot of wires running around this place. That astounded me, quite honestly. And then we're back to a mortar position, and look at the rounds that this guy has available to him. He's on the phone. Hey, where do you want me to send the next one? Implements of war. A line of German POWs under guard, trudging through the snow. Another snowfall photo. It was cold, it was snowy, the weather wasn't great. And in this one here, German POWs are being utilized to dig graves for both American and German casualties. Use the manpower you've got, and my understanding that's acceptable under the Geneva Convention to use the enemy soldiers to do non-combatant things. So you can use them to make in the kitchens, you can use them to dig graves, you can use them to clean streets, you can't use them to clean weapons, you can't use them to reload rounds of ammunition, whatever. We step over to a tank destroyer, and you read a lot about tank destroyers running around, and this one here addresses tank destroyers. And as I said, I'm not a Army guy. I'm a Navy guy, and I flew command and control and resupplied cargo planes mostly. Tank destroyers, my understanding, they were normally lightly armored, so they were faster, and they normally fired a special round, armor-piercing round, so it was hard to run the barrels. So here's a tank destroyer. Looks like a tank, but it has a special purpose. Kill another tank. And here is a German Panzer that's dead, and those two dark things in the front of it, how big was this tank? there's two guys standing in the front of this tank. You can't quite make them out because of the black and white photo, but that's a monstrous vehicle. Okay. I have probably 350 photos of the 101st Airborne Museum. I've run you through what I would classify as a sampling. It's probably one of the most emotional points of the tour and quite honestly of my life. My dad served with the 101st, we can prove that. My mom served in the Navy, Washington, D.C. primarily. My father-in-law served in the Navy from Chicago into Australia, the Philippines, and up that way, Western Pacific. This was an emotional tour. The next one is going to be the Bastogne Barracks, which was very impressive. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.